With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories. CDB approves US $132,000 grant to St. Kitts and Nevis towards sustainability strategy. ECPCGC CEO talks launch of new loan program for ECCU micro-entrepreneurs. Climate advocate in St. Lucia disappointed in US exit from Paris Agreement. Forecasts show sargassum surge could be weeks away. Internationally, Hamas names next Israeli hostages set to be released. Now, the details.
The global economy is projected to experience positive growth according to the latest data from the International Monetary Fund, which predicts approximately 3.3% growth. This optimistic outlook was highlighted by IMF's Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, during Day 2 of the ongoing World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Growth is primarily driven by the United States, although economic performance in other regions remain mixed.
They paint is a nice picture with some undertones. Nice picture because we project growth at 3.3% this year, and next, this is a slight upgrade for 2025. But under the hood of this average number, we have very strong performance for the US. We actually upgraded growth projections for the US by 0.5 percentage point from 2.2 to 2.7, and we have sort of not great European performance, and then we have the rest of the world more or less a little bit up, a little bit down.
Georgieva explained that increased productivity is the key factor behind the United States' strong economic prospects.
The most important message I have for the audience is to ask the question, why? Why growth in the United States is so strong? Why growth in Europe is somewhat underwhelming? Why the emerging markets are not doing fantastically well? And the answer is primarily in the differences in productivity growth. The US is marching ahead with high productivity because capital markets allocate money to dynamic firms, because technology turns into business investment and then it grows into company fast, and because the US has, relatively speaking, abundant, relatively cheap energy. When we look, and then productivity in the United States, year after year after year is close to a percentage point. You look at the rest of the world, advanced economies dropped in productivity vis-à-vis pre-pandemic times from over 1% productivity growth, and it pushes growth up, to meager 0.2% now.
However, she expressed concern about emerging markets, where declining productivity level continue to hinder economic growth.
Even more worrisome, in emerging markets, productivity dropped from 2.5% to 0.7%, and in low-income countries from 2 to 0. So my first message is, the world is changing very rapidly. We are experiencing a tremendous technological transformation. Capital has to have long legs and go where it would make the biggest difference. And you look at capital, where did capital go with its long legs? It went to the United States. And if countries want to move forward, they have to be very aggressive in opening up opportunities for entrepreneurship. And yes, Europe has to have deep capital markets.
Adding to the complexity, United States President Donald Trump proposes tariffs on Mexico, China, and Canada, raising significant questions. What will be the implications of these actions on small island states, developing economies, and nations dependent on global trade?
Confidence is down. Optimism is down. Trust is down. So our real task is, how do we rebuild the bases for optimism in today's world? We're not going back to the era when the Bretton Woods institutions were formed. We're not going back to an era where Henry Morgenthau, the US Treasury Secretary, said in Bretton Woods, prosperity is indivisible. Just think about that. Prosperity is indivisible, meaning I can't prosper unless you are prospering. No nation, even the largest, will prosper unless the rest of the world is prospering. We're not going back to that era. It's past us. It may have rested on a moment in time when the US had an unassailable lead and had that confidence to say prosperity is indivisible. But what we've got to avoid is going to the other extreme of a real zero-sum world. And there's some tendencies in that direction, but I think we are nowhere near it.
Amid these challenges, Singapore's president urged a spirit of open-minded optimism.
So what do we do using all the agency we have, the middle powers, India, ASEAN, Europe, Japan, the international institutions? What do we do in between those two extremes, between the unattainable ideal of prosperity being indivisible and avoiding at all cost a zero-sum world? There's a lot we can do. There's a lot that we can do. But start from the reality that there are strengths in each of our nations, very well described. The US has a unique set of markets and institutions that drives innovation in a way that no other nation or region does. And as Christine says,
he emphasized the need to address economic challenges collaboratively while staying hopeful about their future.
The Caribbean Development Bank, CDB, has approved a U.S. $132,000 grant to support the government of St. Kitts and Nevis in formulating a medium-term development strategy and investment plan for 2025-2029. The plan aims to promote inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development, aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and the country's National Development Planning Framework. It signifies a crucial financial commitment to bolster the nation's development trajectory following the economic disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The implementation of this project will fall under the purview of the Ministry of Economic Development and Investment, MEDI. One of its core components involves the establishment of a comprehensive monitoring and evaluation framework complemented by a digital tool designed to track progress effectively. The intent is to ensure efficient resource allocation and program implementation while maintaining oversight over public investments. This structured approach enhances accountability, efficacy, and durability throughout the development strategy. CDB's acting vice president of operations, Therese Turner-Jones, reaffirmed the institution's dedication to assisting St. Kitts and Nevis realize its development goals. The local government will contribute an additional US $25,000 towards the project, supporting various initiatives including economic diversification, the transition to renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and social programs. The new strategy emphasizes climate resilience and human capital development while fostering social inclusion and gender equality. Ian Durant, CDB's Director of Economics, highlighted the urgency of addressing the country's structural economic challenges, particularly as recovery from the pandemic takes shape. Addressing these challenges will ensure that the nation progresses towards its sustainable development objectives.
Director of Public Prosecutions Adelaide Smith that the young woman charged with 6 offences, including perverting the course of justice, is indeed a Crown Counsel. The police issued a media statement Friday morning identifying Chantrice Dorset as the individual charged. Smith provided an update during a public address.
That charges have been brought against one of its Crown Counsel prosecutors, Miss Chantrice Dorset, by the Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force. The charges stem from the tragic murder of Mr. Akeem Archibald, a young man who was fatally shot with a high-powered semi-automatic rifle on July 20th, 2024. In the aftermath of this incident, the prime suspect, Mr. Kieran Phillip, also known as Torlop, hereafter referred to as the fugitive, fled the Federation by sea and remains at large. Following an extensive police investigation into the murder and efforts to apprehend the fugitive, Ms. Chantrice Dorset has been formally charged with the following offenses. 1. Accessory after the fact to murder. 2. Attempting to pervert the course of justice by assisting the fugitive in fleeing the Federation to shield him from a murder investigation. 3, attempting to pervert the course of justice by assisting the fugitive in fleeing the Federation to shield him from an unlawful possession of firearm investigation. 4, attempting to pervert the course of justice, assisting the fugitive in fleeing the Federation to shield him from a trial for the attempted murder of a person in an unrelated matter. 5, misconduct in public office, advising and counseling the fugitive based on her knowledge as a prosecutor to assist him in evading the police. 6, corruption, trying to use her influence as a prosecutor to get the firearm used in the murder surrendered under an amnesty program.
Smith disclosed that the weapon allegedly used in the commission of the crime has been linked to another individual who is currently awaiting trial.
It is also noteworthy that charges relating to the possession of the high-powered automatic rifle believed to have been used in this crime have been previously laid against the fugitive's close relative, one Mr. B.J. Tuckett, who is currently awaiting trial on remand. The DPP emphasizes that in accordance with the principles of justice, Ms. Dorsett is presumed innocent until proven guilty. It remains the Director of Public Prosecution's Office duty to uphold the integrity of the judicial process and ensure that Ms. Dorsett is afforded her constitutional right to a fair trial.
He also warned both the public and the police against spreading rumors or leaking information that could jeopardize the case. Smith emphasized the importance of allowing due process to take its course without interference.
The Director of Public Prosecution's Office also urges the general public to act with maturity and refrain, I repeat, refrain from speculating about this case based on rumors or publishing inaccurate information that could prejudice the fair trial of these charges. Inappropriate comments or speculation on social media or other public platforms could interfere with the ongoing investigation, undermine the fairness of the judicial process, and it could result in legal consequences. Examples of inappropriate comments include accusations or assumptions of guilt, statements that suggest or reveal confidential details of the investigation, speculation about the evidence or the motives in this case. The Director of Public Prosecution's Office will not hesitate to take firm action against anyone who seeks to interfere with the administration of justice through such conduct. Despite best efforts to contain information related to this sensitive case, leaks touching on the investigation have been noted. Any law enforcement officer found leaking information will face severe disciplinary and legal consequences. The DPPO reiterates its commitment to making an example of those who undermine the sanctity of the justice system by engaging in such unethical practices. The DPPO further reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the rule of law and the pursuit of justice.
Carmen Gomez-Trigg, the CEO of the Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation, ECPCGC, has announced the launch of a new loan program explicitly tailored for micro-entrepreneurs in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, ECCU. The MSME Growth Initiative aims to empower small business owners by offering loans of up to EC $50,000 without the need for collateral or equity. Notably, each borrower will also receive an additional EC $1,500 to cover bookkeeping services, addressing one of the largest barriers fledgling enterprises face: documentation requirements. In a recent discussion on the program, ECCB Connects, Gomez-Trigg emphasized that the ECPCGC was founded to simplify access to financing for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs.
The Eastern Caribbean Partial Credit Guarantee Corporation was established to help small and medium-sized businesses access financing easier by offering a loan guarantee program. At the time of the launch, Governor Timothy N.J. Antoine pointed out that the bank made the move to help small businesses as they account for the largest source of employment in our currency union.
The new program highlights the corporation's ongoing commitment to supporting the sector. It provides financial assistance and aims to enhance financial literacy among microenterprises by ensuring adequate accounting practices. The MSME Growth Program comes in response to identified challenges previously unaddressed within the ECPCGC's original guarantees.
We found over the years that one of the challenges that we did not cater for originally was a lack of documentation of our micro entrepreneurs and our small entrepreneurs as well. That being said, it has affected the level of uptake of the guarantees that we originally went with, the 3 guarantees. And we have had to do some pivoting and work to develop some new ways in which we can bring the micro entrepreneurs who do not have the documentation into our fold.
A pivot that indicates a strategic adaptation to understand the operational needs of micro entrepreneurs allows access to critical growth funds. The initiative also allows businesses to improve their operational capabilities. The funds can be used for various needs, including inventory purchases, equipment upgrades, and settling outstanding debts. Aiming to foster financial independence among entrepreneurs, the ECPCGC provides a substantial guarantee on the loan.
We are going to provide 80% of that security that you need. For this particular product, we say you need 20%. Okay, we're going to give you a blind. We're not even asking for the 20% upfront. We will let you save it in little bits and pieces after you get the loan. So you come into us without documentation, without any security, and you're getting the money to grow your business. In the growth of your business, you will do 2 things. 1, repay the loan, and 2, put aside a little bit of money to grow that collateral that you did not have at the beginning.
This significant backing allows entrepreneurs to obtain funds without upfront collateral, easing their financial burden and mitigating the risk associated with startup loans. The idea is to encourage business growth while simultaneously preparing borrowers to establish or enhance their creditworthiness, creating a sustainable cycle of economic development. For interested micro entrepreneurs operating in member countries, the ECPCGC has ensured multiple communication channels for inquiries and applications. Entrepreneurs can reach out via telephone at 869-662-8989, send a WhatsApp message, or email info@ecpcgc.org. Additionally, the organization maintains a presence on Facebook as ECPCGC, facilitating further engagement. Gomez Trigg assures those seeking assistance that the corporation is readily responsive and dedicated to advising entrepreneurs on navigating the financial landscape, ultimately driving economic growth across the region. In regional news, climate advocate in St. Lucia disappointed in U.S. exit from Paris Agreement. DBS St. Lucia has that story.
President Donald Trump announced after taking office on Monday that he would withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement and end the country's international climate funding. Dr. James Fletcher says that this decision was not surprising, as Trump had previously withdrawn the U.S. from the Paris deal during his first term from 2017 to 2021. However, Fletcher emphasized that the Paris Accord is now more robust and better equipped to handle this development.
And even in 2016, when the United States withdrew from the Paris Agreement, it wasn't fatal. I mean, when the U.S. signaled its intention to withdraw from the Paris Agreement in 2016, when President Trump took office, we had just ratified the Paris Agreement. That was during the COP in Marrakesh. I remember being there, and it was almost like someone had died at that COP when we heard the news that President Trump had won the election, and we knew what was to come. This time around is totally different. The Paris Agreement is a lot more robust. We have the rules that govern the way in which the Paris Agreement is being implemented. We have commitments from several other countries.
One area in which the U.S. withdrawal could affect the agreement is in financing. However, news emerged Thursday that former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg's philanthropic arm would step in to make up for the shortfall. Dr. Fletcher expects more of this to happen.
Also in the United States, there are many non-state and sub-state actors. Sub-states meaning the states, the mayors, the governors, who have invested in significant action to decarbonize, to get to net zero, to invest in clean energy, to invest in clean jobs. The renewable energy sector is very robust and growing in the United States of America. There are many companies, battery companies, that have signaled that they will establish business in the U.S. So the electric vehicle and renewable energy sector is generating quite a number of jobs in the U.S. So it will be very interesting to see on a state level, on a state-by-state level, how what the federal government does has an impact. Because I know in many of the states, California being one of the leaders, there's been a lot of action in support of climate change.
Although the departure of the U.S., one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases globally, from climate negotiations may present a challenge, Dr. Fletcher points out that the resilience of the international climate agreement, bolstered by a growing coalition of nations and non-state actors, suggests that substantial progress can still be made in the fight against global warming, even in the absence of U.S. participation. For the DPS News World, St. Romulus reported.
Forecasts show sargassum surge could be weeks away. ABS Antigua reports.
The return of the sargassum seaweed invasion has been forecasted.
Dependent on what the wind does and what wave direction does, we're likely to start to get glimpses of sargassum picking up in terms of its amount throughout the month, throughout the latter half or the latter quarter of January. We might start to see some, but by February, I'm pretty sure, unless things change, and I won't know until the end of January when I see the new satellite update.
Although 2024 was one of the years when the sargassum nuisance was not as severe as in the previous years, there was still a significant amount of the seaweed reaching shores across the region.
6.6 million tons of sargassum per month on average throughout the entire region. At this point, if you live along the coastline that gets affected by sargassum, you should have developed some ways and means of dealing with it, right? You should have an idea of the best ways to clean your beach, and if not, you should reach out to the Department of Environment because they have some very good recommendations on that. You should have some ideas that if you're asthmatic, the kind of impacts it can have.
Camacho says, based on the sargassum maps, there is more sargassum now in the eastern and western Atlantic than there was in recent years. He says the last time the same level was recorded was in 2018-2019, with 2018 being the second worst year since the invasion began in 2011. 2022 is the worst year on record, but had less sargassum recorded on the maps. Camacho explains, though this year could be even worse, it is still too early to tell.
Normally, your northern and eastern shorelines are what gets affected greatest. But if you have shifting weather patterns, which has become increasingly more prevalent, particularly now in this increased rate of climate change, you can have different areas being affected by sargassum. So everyone really needs to pay attention to this.
We now bring you these international reports.
Well, let's return to that breaking news from the Middle East because Hamas have named the 4 female hostages due to be released tomorrow as part of the Israel-Gaza ceasefire deal. They are Naama Levy, Liri Albag, Daniela Gilboa and Karina Ariev. They are all soldiers who were seized from their army base in southern Israel during the October the 7th attacks. In return for their release, Israel is expected to release about 180 female Palestinian detainees. Well, our correspondent Nick Beek is in Jerusalem and he gave me the latest details.
Hamas have made this announcement giving the names of the 4 hostages who will be released tomorrow. As we expected, they are 4 women and they are, it seems, all members of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. I can give you the names of them. The first soldier to be released tomorrow, this is according to Hamas, is Karina Arebi. The second is Danielle Gilboa. The third, Naama Levy. And the 4th hostage, according to Hamas, to be released tomorrow is Liri Albag. Now, obviously, for their families, a huge moment of relief. But what happens now in the next 24 hours, of course, is crucial. We've got the precedent because, of course, we saw what happened last weekend with that first round of hostages being released. But these are the 4 names. What will happen is that Hamas will hand over the 4 women to the Red Cross, and the Red Cross will then deliver them to IDF forces that remain in the Gaza Strip. So that's what will happen. We anticipate it will take place tomorrow, but of course, just like we saw last weekend, there may well be some delays in this process, but this is what we're hearing from Hamas. These are the 4 names that Hamas has just released, Matthew. So the first part of this would be the 4 women being released and being brought back to Israel to their families. A few hours later, the choreography will be that the next tranche of prisoners in Israeli jails, 180 is the figure that has been talked about. We will have to see if that is actually accurate, but certainly that's what's going to happen. So first of all, the Israeli hostages will be released, then the Palestinian prisoners will be released. All the while, the hope is that this process continues during this initial 6 weeks, 7 weeks of the deal, and that the fighting doesn't resume. So this is what we expect to take place over this weekend.
Nick Beek there in Jerusalem. Let me just give you the very latest on this story because it's coming from Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Israel confirming they have received that list of hostages to be released tomorrow. So we had that initially from Hamas. That's now been confirmed from the Israeli Prime Minister's office.
President Trump has told the Fed to cut rates, but will it listen? Welcome to Macro Matters, your look at what's moving the global economy. I'm Elena Casas. The Federal Reserve sets rates on Wednesday. This week, Donald Trump said he wanted them to cut the cost of borrowing immediately, but markets expect they won't budge until perhaps May. Odetta Kushi is Deputy Chief Economist at First American. Odetta, what are you expecting?
I'm aligned with the markets on this one. I'm not expecting the Fed to cut rates next week, and I think we could probably see the first rate cut in the second half of the year. The Fed themselves told us they're only expecting about 2 25 basis point cuts this year, and that's really a function of our current macro environment.
As recently as September, Odetta, the Fed's own projections predicted a whole percentage point of rate cuts this year. What changed?
It's been a more robust economic environment. Economic growth has exceeded our expectations. Inflation has made progress towards the Fed's 2% target, but towards the end of the year, that progress has stalled a little bit. So we've seen inflation remain stickier than anticipated. And the labor market, of course, has outperformed expectations. We saw very robust growth in the labor force in December. And so as a result of that, the Fed's not seeing the labor weakening that they thought would happen in September. Economic growth has been robust. And so they're saying, we feel comfortable pausing.
Do you think a resurgence of inflation may make the Fed's job even more difficult this year?
If we were to see a resurgence in inflation, I think that would make the Fed reconsider rate cuts. But at this point, there are still enough disinflationary forces in the near term. So I think they'll take a wait and see approach and wait for incoming data to see how we're progressing on both of their mandates, both the labor side and inflation.
For American consumers trying to get a mortgage, though, it's not just the Fed funds rate that matters, is it? Mortgage rates follow Treasury yields, which have risen even as the Fed has cut. So what does that tightening of credit mean?
That's exactly right, which is very unusual compared to historical norms, that when the Fed cuts, we see an increase in the 10-year Treasury yield, but that's exactly what's happened. And for mortgage rates, that means mortgage rates cross the 7% threshold again. And that's really an issue for potential home buyers and the housing market at large, because the average interest rate on an outstanding mortgage is about 4.2%. So with rates at 7%, those existing homeowners, they're not incentivized to sell. And that keeps inventory off the market. And I think will really keep the pace of sales limited this year. With that said, we have seen inventory increase a little bit, and that's allowed for some more sales activities. So this year will be another challenging year for the housing market.
Do you expect it to remain stagnant throughout 2025?
We might see a little bit of progress if rates come down by the end of the year. The general consensus is that we'll see rates slide down a little bit by the end of the year as we get a little more certainty about monetary policy, but we still anticipate rates to remain above 6%, which means a lot of those existing homeowners will still be rate locked into their homes. And so maybe we see a little bit of an increase in purchase activity, but not that much because of that rate lock-in effect.
A wave of protests is sweeping across Serbia, now joined by high school students. They are demonstrating in solidarity with university students and their teachers. Some schools have closed as teachers are boycotting classes, while students' blockades started over 2 months ago. Protesters demand answers following the tragic incident in Novi Sad where 15 people lost their lives at a train station. Teachers have joined the students calling for improved working conditions in schools. Lawyers are also participating in the protests. Today, students have called for a general strike, prompting many businesses to close in a show of support. The people protesting feel that Serbia is a country where the government is corrupt, laws are ignored, and institutions don't work properly. The government, however, denies these accusations, claiming that the protests and school blockades are politically motivated. Pro-government media is discrediting the protesters, and the president is holding rallies across Serbia to secure support.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were: CDB approves US $132,000 grant to St. Kitts and Nevis towards sustainability strategy. ECPCGC CEO talks launch of new loan program for ECCU micro entrepreneurs. Climate advocate in St. Lucia disappointed in US exit from Paris Agreement. Forecasts show sargassum surge could be weeks away. Internationally, Hamas names next Israeli hostages set to be released. Thank you for listening.